Welcome back to another episode of Sowing the Seed podcast. I'm your host, Olivier, and man, that's got a nice ring to it. It's been such a long time since I've been on the mic, since I've released an episode, and it just kind of feels surreal. I remember, having my place in Miami and just being able to be in a space to record much more frequently, obviously, because I felt like home. I was plugged in, you know what I mean, and just in that mode of like releasing content. And it's been almost a year now since I've released the last episode. For you guys who have followed the show, the last episode that I did was with Rachel and Amanza, and she shared her testimony about going from basically darkness to light, her testimony of leaving a life of witchcraft into now full relationship with Jesus. And it's been cool, just receiving so much, breakthrough in my own life, and now going back and even seeing that testimony from Rachel and seeing where she is current day has been really special. She's getting ready to get married herself, and she's in the midst of that season of planning, and we're all excited for her, Jess and I. And yeah, man, so it's been a year since that episode, and now Jess and I are living in Dallas, Texas, and we were sent to Mercy Culture, which I think some of you may understand, or some of you may have known that the major reason why Jess and I moved to Texas was to attend the church Mercy Culture, which was initially in Fort Worth, and then they planted a new location in Dallas. And in the time that God had shown us that we were going to leave Florida for Texas, there's a lot of confirmations, obviously, and just leading up to the time that we left was a year after God had told us. And that season was just walking closely with the Lord to basically do all the things that God had for us to do back home. Myself being in Miami and Jess closing out that season of her being in Tampa was just amazing. I mean, we got to really spend time with our families. We got to blend our families together finally in marriage. We ended up getting married in December of 2024, and that was a testimony in itself. I remember we already had known that we were going to get married, and we had trusted the Lord to tell us when. And I'll never forget, Jess and I were riding around with my mom at the time. I came back to Tampa, and I was living there for like a month before we were going to head to Dallas. And one day we're just in the car getting ready to go to the mall, and I remember my mom looked at me in the rearview mirror, and she was like, "What are you guys waiting for? Why don't we just go to the courthouse now? Why don't we just sign the paperwork? Why don't we just get married?" And I remember Jess and I looked at each other, and we had been praying, obviously, for the Lord to just, show us the perfect timing for us to go and get married at the courthouse. And so we went that day, and we went and started the process of getting married. And we didn't know, obviously we couldn't get married that day, but the process ensued, and we ended up getting married on December 16th. And it was super special, man. It was just like so amazing how God just walked us through all these new things that we, had never really had prior knowledge of. I didn't even know how to go to the courthouse. The name change that would come after with Jess, and being there for that whole process was special. And just God's grace on our lives to truly walk us through a lot of the first time things that came with getting married and also moving. So but right before December of us getting married, I obviously had proposed to Jess. We had planned a trip basically to meet my father. And for you guys who don't know, my mother is Haitian, and my dad, my father, my biological father, is from Pakistan. And so what's interesting is that my mom took me away from my dad when I was probably 2 years old. And the reason being was because of the divide and the differences in cultures. And I think at the time of me being 2, I think my dad wanted to, either take me to Pakistan to meet his family, or begin to just kind of usher me into the culture of Islam, and the many different things that you can imagine comes with being son of someone who's Muslim. So that disconnect caused my mom to take me. And so for 31 years of my life, I never had a relationship with my biological dad. And so my mom ended up remarrying. And I think by the age of maybe 6 or 7, that's when my stepdad came into my life, and love my mom amazingly. I have 2 other siblings today, Shaid and Christina, who came from that new marriage. And then, you fast forward to 2024 in September. I planned a trip with Jess to go to New York to meet my father. And this was one of the things that Jess, my wife, had prophesied over me basically when we started courting. The Lord had given her a vision one day about basically me meeting my father. And he would give her prophetic dreams after that time. And it would always just be the Lord showing that his plan was to restore a relationship with my father, or at least for me to go and meet him and begin the process of doing that. And so I remember we go on that trip in in September, and just kind of give you a background story. I guess for 31 years of my life, I didn't even know who my dad was. I heard stories, I'd seen pictures. My mom had told me as best as she could, things about him, similarities that we shared, but could never find him online, could never find his contact information or anything. And so I remember reaching out to a really good friend of mine that attended a church in Miami that I was at for 3 years. His name was Roman, and Nia, his wife is Nia. And I reached out to him and just basically told him what season I was in and trying to find any kind of information that would lead me to my dad, basically. And so they put their hard hats on. They began to just seek out my father for me, on behalf of me, which was such a beautiful gift, of just like a favor that in hindsight, if it hadn't been for them, I don't even know if I would have carried forward and done it. They really encouraged me, and really were just able to get me all the information I needed, basically. And I remember one day, after a couple weeks of the Lord convicting me to basically call my brother, my half brother on my biological dad's side. I kept putting it off, and I don't know, I was feeling a lot of shame. I was feeling a lot of condemnation from the enemy, and just, I was feeling silly. After 31 years, I felt like I would be taken as a joke, essentially, for me to be reaching out to my dad. I felt like, hey, this is like some kind of movie, that I'm trying to be a part of or make, into some degree. And, there's just a bunch of emotions that went with doing that thing that God told me to do. And so I remember one day, Roman, who got the information for me, literally called my younger biological brother, and basically was giving him the whole spiel of me trying to look for my father. And I remember he was on the other line, and he told me to wait. And he clicked back over, and he was like, hey, I have him on the phone. I just kind of updated him really quickly. But I think he's agreeing now to like talk to you. So he clicked over, put us on 3-way, and I just go blank, bro. I can't even say a word. I'm just listening, and my friend Roman's just like, yeah, he's just trying to find his dad. He's trying to get a hold of his dad, and you were the only person that we can get the number, of. And so, would you be willing? And I remember my brother just saying, hey, like, this is a lot. Let me just like call you back, because I just feel like I don't really understand what's going on right now. So come to find out, he didn't even know about me. And I also have a sister. I also have another younger brother. So two brothers and a sister on my biological dad's side. And so never talked to that brother ever again. That was the first and only conversation that we had, obviously, until I met him in September of 24. And so I just remember, for some weeks after that, just not feeling myself, just feeling silly, feeling distraught, feeling like, man, God, if you call me to do this, like, why wouldn't it be easier? Why wouldn't they reach out? Why wouldn't finding my dad's number be easier? Because you got to remember, like, at this point, he was the only person that I was able to find any contact information on. So, that falls through. And I remember Roman had sent me the address, basically, the only home that my dad had owned. And I was like, man, like, how crazy would it be if I just showed up to his house? And I remember running by my mom the address, and she said, "Yeah, that's the house that I remember leaving. That's the house I remember him having. And if you want to move forward and meet your dad, then no better time than now, and no better opportunity than you do to just go ahead and go up there in New York and just knock on his door." And so you fast forward September 24, on the actual 24th, I think is what it was as well. A couple weeks before that, I had planned basically to meet my biological dad, knock on his door, and then from New York, where he lived, I was going to drive to Toronto, Canada, which is about 6.5, 7 hours away, which is Jess's favorite city. And I just planned to basically propose right after meeting my dad. Don't ask me why. I don't even think this was like really rational thinking at this point. I think it was just like moving with the Holy Spirit, trusting him, and just feeling the conviction to do these things back to back. I just felt like time is of the essence. I know we're moving here in like a month or two. I know we're about to get our marriage license, and shortly thereafter. So I'm like, man, let's just knock out everything right now in this season before I literally get sent off to Dallas. And so, yeah, planned that trip. Basically got in contact with the photographer, the videographer, to meet us out there in Toronto. I just found them on Fiverr. You know what I mean? Just looking for, anyone that can help make that special. Research some places and ended up coming up with this beautiful backdrop, which was, it wasn't an ocean. It was actually a lake in Canada, in Toronto. And just, mad research went into it. But once again, it was just this thing that the Lord kind of led me into. I remember being on the phone with one of my friends, Julian, and I was just telling him about this plan that I had to basically go meet my dad and then propose after. And so initially I wanted to do it in New York because it's another place that my wife Jess loves. And I was like, man, just could knock it out right here. And in that conversation, he was like, man, if she loves Toronto, why don't you just drive to Toronto after meeting your dad? And so Julian was the one that gave me the idea. And it was truly the Holy Spirit speaking through him, because I remember he said that, and that like literally a light bulb went out in my head. And I was just like, man, Toronto is like really going to be a beautiful experience, because I've realized how much she loves it. And I've realized how much I've heard about it, and like how beautiful would it be to experience that together and just, ride out, and not even really understand how like that would turn out with my dad, obviously doing it after. I was just like, I trust you, Lord. I trust you. Everything is going to go good, go well, and we'll be able to just knock this all out. So, basically I knock on my dad's door. I remember driving the rental car like probably an hour and a half, stuck in traffic. I got my wife to be, beside me. My mom is in the back seat. My sister Christina is in the back seat as well. And they had just, obviously come with me to just, be, a shoulder to lean on, and to just be there for me. And it was really crazy, man. Like thinking back on that drive, upstate from the city to go to New York to meet my dad. It was like I was full of emotions. I remember feeling stupid. I remember feeling rejected already, even though I wasn't. I remember feeling like angry and upset and frustrated that I had to be the one to do this. There was just a lot of shame. There was a lot of condemnation that the enemy was coming against me with. And basically, I remember putting on worship music in the car, and I just began to pray in my mind, just out to the Lord, and just say, Lord, take away all these feelings that I have that don't align with the purpose that you have today. Help me to stay in the moment, help me to be used, but help me to have compassion. Take away this anger, take away this frustration, and just give me a heart that's willing to do the thing that you told me to do in excellence. And I just don't want to miss this moment, because I know it's you who sent me, and I know since you sent me, you've prepared the way for me. And I remember driving there, and just after that prayer, feeling so much peace come over me. And I remember Jess, consoling me and just like speaking life into the whole situation. My mom and sister were in the back, and they were just like, I can't believe you're doing this. It was just a surreal moment for us all, as you can imagine. And it felt very much like a movie. And so I remember as we got close, the Lord began to speak to me, and he came and impressed on my heart that I needed to do it alone. Initially, I wanted so much to just have my wife to be and my mom and my sister with me, but I realized that would have been a lot more heavier to bring a whole group of people rather than just doing it and trusting the Lord to get me through it. And so I remember we were maybe like 15 minutes away, and I was already looking at like a shopping center to drop them off at. And I remember having the conversation as we got close, and I was like, hey guys, like, change of plans. I feel like I need to drop you guys off. Why don't you guys go get something to eat, go shopping, and I'm going to go ahead and do this thing by myself. And I remember they were just in disagreeing, they were disagreeing at first. They were just like, no, like, we need to be there. We want to be there. We want to, obviously endure this with you. We don't want you to feel alone. And I remember saying, God has me. This is not like a self, idea. This is not just my flesh or me desiring this, because I would want you guys there. But I realized that God wants me to do it alone. And so I remember dropping them off. And, it was kind of crazy, because I'm going to back up a little bit. I remember that morning, even before getting in the car and driving to his place, I remember having second thoughts. And once again, the Lord uses all things and all people, all friendships that we have in the Lord. I remember that morning, I was going back and forth in my mind, and I was just like, should I have my family there? Should I not? And out of nowhere, I had told my best friend, Johnny Rios. He lives in New York. We've been friends since like children, since middle school. And him and I have been really close lately, especially because he has come fully into his faith, and he just believes Jesus. He just loves the Lord so much, and his newfound relationship. So I remember that morning he texted me. He was like, hey brother, I know today is probably a heavy day for you, but I feel like today's the day to meet your dad. And I texted him back, and I was like, bro, why did you text me that? And he was like, I remember we had that conversation. I know you're on that trip right now, and you're probably having second thoughts. And I started telling him, I was like, yeah, I just have the address. I can't even call him. I can't even, really do anything that I would want to do before going to basically alert him, so I don't look silly just walking up to his door. And I remember Johnny texted me back and just being like, go and do it by yourself. Drop everybody off and just do it yourself. God has you. So he tells me this at the beginning of the day. And so you fast forward, 2 hours later, I'm driving. And it's not that I had forgotten that he had told me that, but it was more like, okay, he can't be possibly talking to me as if the Lord is speaking through him, this can't be what's going on. And, the Lord brings that back again and just says, yeah, you're going to do it alone. And so the Lord confirmed that word that Johnny, basically said. And I just was obedient, man. I was just like, all right, Lord, I don't know what this is going to look like, but I trust you. And so, I dropped my parents off. I dropped my mom off, dropped my sister, dropped, Jess off, and, about 10 minutes away. And I remember passing by the house like 4 times. And, I was just like, man, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I'm trying to think of things that I may, like an icebreaker. I don't know. I'm just at a loss for words at this point. I'm like, Lord, you just have to fill my mouth with things to say, and really just lead me here, because you've got me this far, Lord. And so I remember finally mustering up enough courage to, finally get to the driveway. And they had a long driveway, so I had to if I'm gonna commit, I'm going in, we're going in there. It's like a one of those New York houses you can imagine that has a long driveway you have to go through. So it's there ain't no going back. Once you are in there, that's it. So I remember parking, and I remember praying, and I felt the peace of God again. And I felt like there were angels with me. I felt I wasn't alone. I felt God's peace, but also him basically leading me physically. I felt the presence there, and it was nothing like I've ever experienced before, but I literally envisioned 2 angels, one in the front and one in the back, that were just with me. Not only providing me, peace and clarity and, backup, in the spiritual realm. But also they were pleased. I felt that it was pleasing to the Lord what I was about to step into. And so, I get up out of the car and I make my way to the door and I just start knocking. And I'm sitting there and I'm pacing back and forth. And I'm like, man, Lord, like, I can't believe you got me here. I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe this moment is finally here. I get to finally meet my dad after 31 years of not knowing him, not having a relationship with him. Here we are. And as I'm pacing back and forth, finally someone comes to the door. They open the door and they look at me and they're on the phone and they go, hey, can I help you? And I look at her, and as I'm looking at her, I begin to see myself in her, as if I feel like we're related, but I don't understand who she is. But in that moment, it felt like peace. It felt like home. It felt like family. And I remember she asked me that, and I just said, hey, I'm looking for Raja, which is my dad's name. I was like, is he home? And she goes, no, he's not, but can I take a message? He'll probably be here this evening. And I go, my name's Olivier. My last name is Ishtiak. He's my dad. And she looks at me and she looks at her phone. She's like, I have to go. She basically hangs up on the person. She looks at me and she's like, and I begin to take out my my ID to like give to her, because I'm like, this sounds crazy, especially if she doesn't even know me or has never heard of me, for me to say this and not provide some level of proof. So I'm literally over here about to take my ID out. And she goes, no way, Olivier, I know you. He actually just spoke about you. Like, come in. And like, bro, when I tell you, I go from chest beating out of my shirt to immediately like, what is going on, Lord? Like, what is happening right now? How does this person know who I am? And as I'm entering the house, I hear the Holy Spirit whisper, that's your sister. And I'm like, I had no idea. Mind you, I only found one number, which was my brother's number. I didn't even know I had two other siblings, a sister and another brother. So I'm going through all the emotions right now. And as I'm walking up, into the house, I'm just thinking in my mind, my God, this is about to be the greatest day I've ever experienced, probably. And so I get upstairs and my sister's there and she begins to just express how shocked she is, but how happy she is. Basically, my dad had told her about me only a month or two ago prior to me coming. And my dad, for, basically long story short, he had been depressed for many years. He had been through a lot. And at this point, the last 2 or 3 months, he'd had a lot of struggles and battles with his health. He'd had a few heart attacks over the course of 10, 15 years. And then most recently had another one, which was pretty severe. And I think from that heart attack, a lot of depression and anxiety began to manifest. And he began to pray that basically the Lord would bring his son back to him. And so, as I'm catching up with her, I'm like, oh my God, you're my sister. And she's like, yeah, you're my brother. I'm just, and we're just both sitting here in awe, just like shocked at the moment. And I remember her just beginning to say, hey, I have a lot of questions, but like, I feel like you have a lot to say. So let me just hear you out and listen to like how we're even here today. And so we just start talking. And after I asked a few questions, basically she told me, you're not going to believe this, but this is so God ordained, because you literally came on his birthday. You literally came the day of our father's birthday. And I was like, no way. I mean, I didn't even know when my dad was born. I didn't know his birthday. Like I said, 31 years, I don't know this man. I have seen pictures, I've heard stories, but there's no amount of details that I have that I'm working through and with, to even remember a detail like that, but to understand and realize that God is so intentional that we can't even fathom that when we say yes, how the pieces begin to just manifest and begin to just be laid out before us. And so for me to come on my dad's birthday was so special. Not only was it an answer to prayer on his side, but it was also showing me that out of my obedience, God would do exponentially more than I could ever dream or expect of him. And that was just once again another confirmation that this was God ordained. For us to get tickets to decide on this day, for me to go forth on the 24th of September on his birthday, to show up to his house and to be face to face with my sister was insane. And so as she's telling me this, she just begins to tell me about his health, how it's been declining, her prayers, and just, basically where he's been and how today he's actually working. And I was just like overcome with emotions, as you can imagine. I'm just sitting there and I'm just taking everything in and I'm looking around. I'm just like, man, God, this is phenomenal. And so I asked her, I said, where is he? And she's like, yeah, he's working. He's, he'll be home later on. And so it gave us like 2.5 hours to basically talk and catch up. And fast forward, my dad finally gets there. He's like a whole foot shorter than me. I had no expectation that he was going to be that short. But it was a cool moment. Finally gave him a hug, embraced him. She had called him before to let him know basically that his son was there. But he didn't expect that it was me. He expected that she was referring to one of the other brothers, which also came in with my dad because they were all working together. And so when he came, he was shocked. And he sat down and he just began to weep. And he began to basically confirm everything that my sister had said, which was that he had been praying for months and months and months that God would bring me to him and that he would have an opportunity to basically sit across from me and talk and just love on me. And that's what we did. That's what we did for like a good 2 hours until I told him like my mom and my wife to be was there, and that I told him basically the plans of proposing shortly after and me desiring him to meet my wife to be and my mom, obviously. And so it was just a cool moment where, I'm talking to my brothers as well, talking to my dad, talking to my sister. We're just sharing this cool moment. As you can imagine, it just feels like a movie, man. I just can't even put into words like what that moment felt like, but it was so freeing, and it was so vindicating as well. And it was just this moment where like everything, just time stood still. There were no thoughts or anxious moments in my mind or in my world at that point. At this point, it was just God finally confirming and doing the thing that he told me he was going to do. And obviously it took obedience on my end, but like I always say, it's like it becomes easy to be obedient when we serve such a good God who lays it out before us. It's not that it wasn't hard to do the things that led up to that moment, but doing it, the Lord made it easy. He made it clear. He made it concise. He made the impossible very much possible. And even now, as I'm recanting this story, I'm just emotional because I'm just like, man, like how many other things on the other side of our yes do we miss out on because we're not willing to just partner with what God has told us? And, I just want that to be an encouragement for you that, and especially if there's, a relationship like that of a parent that has been severed, that has, just gone awry, and the Lord has put in your heart to restore that relationship and to restore the pathways for communication. I just want this to be a testimony and testament that God will do it if you say yes, if you obey him and realize that it's not on you. It's just going to take a part of you and for you to walk the way that I did into that and just expect that the Lord will do the impossible and do the heavy lifting. And that's what he did for me. And it was this cool moment where, I go to pick, my mom, my sister, and my wife up, and, they're shocked. They're just like, oh my God, like you can imagine, we're all just giving each other hugs. We're all just embracing and just catching up. And my mom is seeing her ex-husband, and they begin to cry. And my sister is meeting my other sister. And, sadly, I think in the commotion, I didn't realize that my two brothers who didn't come, basically were going through a lot of emotions at that time. And so instead of being a part of that, they ended up going, elsewhere. And I respect that, obviously, for my sister and myself and, my family, it was an amazing moment. But I can't help but think, man, like, God, I know you're going to restore that relationship that I have with my brothers. And so they weren't a part of us all meeting together, but I know in Jesus' name that the Lord has plans to restore every single relationship with regards to like my biological dad. And so, yeah, man, it was tough to see that and realize the hurting that happens on the other side. Obviously for them, they didn't know, what my sister knew. My dad had only told my sister. He didn't tell the two boys. And, their culture, being the firstborn is very important, and it comes with a lot of blessings, and it comes, with the expectation as a boy in that culture that you should be the first to know the things of the family. And, they felt like they were left out, and that is an area that I understand, and I give them space and time to navigate that, and also pray on behalf of them that the Lord will soften their heart, hopefully, to, talking to me, and for us to also, create a genuine relationship eventually. So, just super powerful, man, super powerful. We go out to eat, we hang out, we're catching up, we're taking pictures. Obviously, it's his birthday. The next day we hang out once more. I get him a gift, I give him a hug, and I just remember, telling him once again, hey, I'm gonna propose to Jess, in 2 days, and I'm just so happy that we could meet and exchange numbers, and that was it, man. We just had that amazing 2 days of just like being able to just catch up and hang out together and make up for lost time, and you fast forward that night, the second night. Jess and I hop in the car and we literally drive 7 hours, and we're about 2 hours outside of Toronto. We stop in upstate New York, and I think around 3-4 a.m. we're driving for hours, and we're just finally stopped. And I'm just over here just taking everything in, about to pivot and realize now that like now you're about to propose. You're about to propose to your wife to be, and after just doing the unthinkable, God quickly pivots me, and I begin to get in that place of like, all right, Lord, this is up next. Like, I'm about to marry this beautiful woman that you put in my life, who's been such a blessing to me and my family, and just all the plans that God, has basically spoken over me, and just, she's been the greatest gift that I've ever received. And so, it was cool, man. We just get to Toronto, and we settle in, and I don't know if she knew that I was going to propose, but she was just excited to be in Toronto. And, it was just a magical moment. We finally get to the park. It rained before. I'm over here like on edge of my seat, like, Lord, stop the rain. You got to stop the rain. I'm over here texting the photographer and videographer back and forth and trying to get this moment like perfect. And sure enough, the Lord just does what only he can do. He just orchestrated everything so beautifully, and, I ended up proposing. It was a beautiful day. We took pictures, took videos, and, went to dinner after. But, man, just such a beautiful trip, man. Man, I feel like, my life at times feels like a movie, and I feel like doing life with the Lord, that's what it is, really what it is. It's like God is always creating a better, just script than he did before, and we get to walk in those scripts. We get to walk in those stories and be a part of them if we're so willing, and, just able to be obedient. And, God will really wow us, man. And that's what he did with that testimony. And so you fast forward, man, it's just, it's been a year since that all happened. We're in the 1st of December now, and so we're almost at a year of actually being married. We got married in December 16th, shortly after proposing and doing all that fun stuff in New York. And we get ourselves ready. We end up saying yes once again to the call that God had for us to move to Dallas. And man, it's been an amazing 10 months of being here in Dallas, married, going through all the joys of being married and being in a new city, working a new job, serving at a new church, and also navigating just the realization that I'm now a husband, and that obviously got lost in the mix, because you do all the things and then you finally get to a place where you're away from family, away from distractions. You're no longer serving at the same capacity that I was in Miami as a youth pastor. And I say youth pastor, but, I don't even really consider myself a youth pastor at that time. It was more so just like, I just stepped up and said yes once again. There was no title, there was no expectations. It was just a moment where I realized God was using me for a season there, and he was once again fulfilling his desire for me to work with young adults, to work with, children, and, just get that under my belt. And it was so special, man. I think about those kids that I got to, steward for a season, and, we catch up, and we often talk about those times. But, now I'm over here in Dallas, and, I'm not serving to that same capacity that I was before, but I think it's been a beautiful moment that God basically has given Jess and I to be free of any type of, business or just burdens that we had before, obviously getting married. And it's been beautiful to be in a space where I'm able to focus on her. She's able to focus on me. We're able to focus on our roles together. And we've really needed this time apart from our family, our friends, to be able to, just grow into a new chapter, as husband and wife, and to really, settle in to Dallas, because this is so much more different than anything that we have ever experienced living in Florida of our entire lives. Dallas is beautiful, but it's cold, it's dry, and culturally it's much different than what we are familiar with. And so there's definitely some growing pains in that. But I would say it's been such a beautiful journey getting here, and now just seeing God's hand in our lives. When we moved here in January 1st of 25, we were so excited. I remember getting attacked, actually, when we first got here. I ended up going to the hospital, man, and had excruciating back pain. I had to go get an MRI, and basically MRI was what it was. It was terrible. But I don't partner with that. I've been partnering with God healing me, and my back has been, good ever since. I think it was more spiritual than it was anything, but I just been believing the Lord for that healing, and I believe He's already done it. I just have to come into agreement with that truth. But you fast forward, there's been some bumps in the road in terms of just like being attacked, and most recently even with some friendship that we had in Florida. It was like, man, the Lord, when He does the things that he's promised to do, obviously there's opposition. The enemy, obviously hates when we obey God. And so, he sent a lot of attacks our way, but, I'm able to laugh about it now, but I can assure you I wasn't laughing in the moments, of spiritual warfare. And, man, God got us through, you know what I mean? Like when you step out and you do the thing that God told you, you can expect that you're going to, have some type of force on the other end trying to stop you, you know what I mean? And that's, what we had. But, thank God for His goodness. Thank God for His protection. And, we've just been thankful, that we're now in a season where a lot of the heavy burdens that we were carrying with us into this season are now, they've been lifted. And so, Jess and I are excited to continue growing here in Dallas. And, we love our church family, our Mercy Culture. We've become ushers. And so we've been ushering and just really, allowing the Lord to place us right where He wants us. And though it feels different, it is different, it looks different, we know that we're right in His will. And so we've just been, waiting patiently. I feel like this season has been a season of waiting patiently. And so, for you guys out there who, have a relationship with me, who know me personally, just keep Jess and I in your prayers that the Lord will do exactly what He wants to do with us, and that we'll just continue partnering with Him. We love Him, and the only reason why we came was because of Him. And so, I just wanted to encourage you guys with that, and just understanding that, like, even when you step out into unknown territory, God is with you. And the enemy, obviously takes notice as well. And so, yeah, man, I'm just excited. I'm excited. It's December 1st now. We have a month before the new year. And I just can't believe that a year has already passed by to where now we're entering a new season.